In a world gone mad, only one man, okay, maybe more, had the... Welcome to all the fisher folk out there and people kind. Oh boy, do we have a show for you. But before we start, I'd just like to say tomorrow will be the 75th anniversary of D-Day, so it'll be it's a good thing to remember, so just be mindful of that tomorrow. It is probably the most important and probably the most interesting and wide-reaching operation in all of military history, so hopefully we can have time to talk about it at the end of the show, if there still is time, and I don't die of an aneurysm for all the craziness I have to cover. Some of that craziness includes terrorism in Toronto. Now, Al-Quds Day, marching under terrorist flags, killing gays, genocide against Jews. All of this happens with a police escort while the police looked at the terrorist flag, listened to the incitement to violence, and physically kept the protesters, the people who were protesting against terrorism and genocide, away from the Al-Quds Day people. I will get into everything you need to know about why John Tory, Doug Ford, Justin Trudeau all enabled terrorism. They knew they would, they said they wouldn't, but when push comes to shove, to politicians and police forces, supporting terrorism, calling for genocide against Jews, calling for the death of gays is perfectly okay if you fit into one particular category. You can guess what? It's the most peaceful category there is. Then, the Liberals make a complete mockery of Indigenous history, of Indigenous culture, and the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women inquiry has come out. It's just a mind-blowing... It's everything that the critics said it would be, and we're going to have to go into that because it just frustrates me to no end, and then we're going to actually have to go into real Indigenous history because it's interesting and it is not what you're going to learn from the CBC or probably in the school system anymore. Then we have Vox and the left-wing corporate media is trying to destroy YouTube and independent creators. We have to go into this fight between Vox and Stephen Crowder because it has very large implications outside of just those two people. Plus, Catherine McKenna and Justin Trudeau get caught red-handed in a lie. Remember when they lied about all the climate change? Well, they got... We'll get into all that. Then we will go on a nationwide search. You and I will go together and see if we can find Andrew Scheer's spine. It might be somewhere. I mean, he's a big guy, so we assume it's a big spine. I'll look at Ontario, you look at other places, and if we find it, let me know, and hopefully we can send it to him so he doesn't blow this election like the coward he is. All right. Now, usually, supporting terrorism is a bad thing. Most people agree that terrorist groups are bad. 4 out of 5 dentists say that advocating for genocide is evil, and killing gays is generally frowned upon in today's society. I've been told that we're all pretty homophobic, and today is Pride Month. Actually, Pride Month kicked off in Toronto with calls to kill the gays. But I doubt you're going to get any protests from the gay community. Why is that? Because welcome to Al-Quds Day. Al-Quds Day, a place where all the Israel haters, far lefties, union reps from CUPE can get together, spout nonsense propaganda, and support terrorist regimes. Okay. Now, before I get into describing the march, we're just going to show you a video that's been making waves around the internet. Here's an interview with one of the Al-Quds Day people, and from what I did, and I could say that represents easily 1/3 to 1/2 of the people's views there at Al-Quds Day. So let's bring up the video and meet the people protesting the existence of Israel.
What would happen to a gay couple in Gaza?
Executed according to Islamic law. Really? Islam doesn't endorse gayism. Islam doesn't endorse homosexuality.
Well, okay, so would you like to see Sharia law in Canada replace Canadian law?
At some point it will. You know, because we have families, we are making babies. You're not. Your population is going down the slump. That's right? Yeah. By 2060, Muslims will be the biggest religious group the world over. Right. What are you going to do then?
Actually,
are you going to oppose Sharia?
Charming stuff from that lad. Now, this is a Sharia law advocate there. Now, I went into Al-Quds Day. I tried to go undercover, but I was recognized by one of the activists right away. I tried to go in a second time, and I was physically removed. It's on video of me being physically pushed out by a union rep wearing her union lanyard of CUPE. That is the Canadian Union for Public Sector Employees. They, according to themselves, represent 6,500 Canadians, and they align themselves with that. Now, you might say, okay, that guy's views don't represent the Al-Quds Day March. But this Al-Quds Day is an organization that has invited a man, Kevin Baird. He has been invited to speak. He is a noted Holocaust denier. So they've invited Holocaust deniers to push the conspiracy theory, and I've put this up on the page, that Israel did 9/11. And this is one of the biggest problems we kind of face here in the Islamic community, is we try and talk about terrorism and get people, serious terrorist experts, and we all have these things, and yes, there's a few, great people, but no one talks about the stat that in the UK, because the UK actually did some surveys and found out, more Muslims in the UK believe Israel is behind 9/11 than Al-Qaeda. That's right. More people in the UK, more Muslims in the UK think the Jews did 9/11 than Muslims. Now, I don't think it's all of Islam, but clearly when someone says Allahu Akbar and explodes, you kind of guess their motivation a little bit. So that is an event sponsored by 650,000 people at CUPE. They were flagged for the Islamic Republic of Iran because, of course, Al-Quds Day is sponsored by Iran. It was started by the Ayatollah Khomeini, noted mass murderer, killer of gays, hanger of gays on cranes, breaker of chains to no one. It is illegal to be Baha'i in Iran. If you are caught being a Baha'i 3 times, that can get you killed. Iran, a second largest number of executions in the world, only behind China, which has over 1 billion people. They only have 80 million. They're highest per capita. And they execute the most children in the world, not even per capita. Iran executes the most minors. Good for them. This is the organization that sponsors Al-Quds Day, and you see their flags wave over. They even had signs of the faces of both Ayatollahs Khomeini and Khamenei. Great, great people. Protesting apartheid while waving flags of the Islamic Republic of Iran. We saw Lebanese flags there. There were flags from Lebanon. There were flags from Yemen. There were flags of Venezuela. The legion of liberal democracy made up of Yemen, Venezuela, Lebanon, and Iran. Those are the countries that you really want the support of. You're on the right side of history when you get Lebanon, Yemen, Iran, and Venezuela backing your protest. Also, there are some Antifa people with full balaclavas because, again, you're probably the good guy when you're in a balaclava in June. It's Confucius, old Confucian saying. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. Now, here's one of the signs that showed up at Al-Quds Day. Let's show the signs. Last Karba is ready, so is last Hadar. Okay, what this is referring to is there is a battle at Kabir. You might know Muhammad, may peace and blessings be upon him, was the most peaceful man that ever did peace. That is why this is called the religion of peace. Some people may publish fake news that Muhammad was a conquering warlord, just because it says so in the Quran and the Hadith. Now, one of the battles Muhammad fought with peace was against a town in Kabir, which was majority Jewish. And they had spoken ill against him. They said something along the lines of, maybe they said, hey, probably don't marry a 6-year-old girl. Wait till she's at least 12. I know. So he went and he peacefully fought a war against them. He defeated them and then peacefully executed hundreds of Jews in the town of peace. These were peaceful beheadings, as we know. So after he peacefully executed all the Jews, this was one of those rah-rah moments. And this is often brought up by pro-Palestinian protesters who just want Palestinian human rights. That's why we wave the Lebanese flag, even though Lebanon kept Palestinians in literal cages. You weren't allowed to leave the refugee camps until the mid-1990s. They kept them in the same spot physically for 50 years. But they all chant, Karbala is coming. This is the kill the Jews chant. You saw this, they've chanted this in Sweden, and then they firebombed a synagogue. They chant this in New York, and then you see the rise in anti-Semitism. So this is openly advocating for genocide. Now, that's usually a bad thing. Usually, when you advocate for genocide against a particular religious minority, Justin Trudeau gets on the TV and says, you, Canada, are evil. You are racist. You are Islamophobic. But when you say we want to execute gays and murder Jews, there's something that sometimes makes the Prime Minister say, this isn't racist. This is just social justice. Can anyone guess what that little something is? What is that one little something you can do to make your genocidal protest not genocidal? It's not coming to me. Maybe it's coming to you, but I can't think of it. Now let's see the most interesting flag. We've talked about the different flags at the rally. Let's see the final flag. This one's straight off my cell phone. That is the flag of Hezbollah. You know Hezbollah. Hez, party, Bullah of, no, Allah, God. Party of God in Lebanon. A listed terrorist organization. Again, a proxy of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Here they are, marching down the streets, waving the flag of Hezbollah. I showed this to a police officer. He said, "Don't worry, someone is on it." I'm waiting. There's been zero comment from the Toronto Police Force. There's been zero comment from John Tory on this. And again, that is a terrorist organization. This is martial support for a terrorist organization. Now, all of this needs to be seen with another context. Doug Ford said he wasn't going to let this rally happen, and I said that he shouldn't be banning hateful things on Queen's Park. He should just straight out ban Al-Quds Day because of its terrorist connections. I've done my free speech thing on it. We're not going to relitigate that factor. John Tory said he's not going to let this happen. They are not going to grant a permit for this to happen. City Hall passed a resolution a couple weeks ago. We're not going to grant a permit. The organizer, Demetrios Skeris, even wrote an article about how it was so great that he didn't have a permit but could still do this. So with no permit, there were hundreds of police officers there. They set up a sound system. You cannot do that. So, as I said, you can wave signs. You can say what you want without a permit. It is a free country. What you cannot do without a permit is you cannot block a public courthouse. You cannot then set up a stage and a sound system without a permit on public property, or in front of a courthouse on the street. Right? That's a disturbance of the peace. You cannot close down University Avenue. They closed down a main street. The police helped them close down a main street, saw them wave the flag of Hezbollah, a listed terrorist organization, was pointed out to them, and what they did is the police formed a blockade and wouldn't let the pro-Israel people protest, the pro-counter-protest, wouldn't let us march down, take pictures of them. No, we were completely blocked off. We were sent away from them. That's what the majority of the police were doing. Now, this is a bit hypocritical because a couple weeks before this, there was the Jewish festival, the Israel Street Festival in Bathurst. Now, there's lots of street festivals in Canada, lots in Toronto. There's a Filipino festival, there's a Saudi Arabian festival, there's a Taste of the Danforth, there's a Taste of Italy, there's a Taste of this, right? There's 8,000 different specified festivals for different groups of people. Some of those are Jewish. So at a Jewish festival, there was Jewish stuff and pro-Israel stuff because Israel's linked to the Jewish people. And then a bunch of these people, the Al-Quds Day people, the protesters, without a permit, the police escorted them to protest the Israel Street Festival, call for the destruction of Israel. Does this happen to anyone else? Right? What would the Toronto Star say if during the Filipino festival, a hateful group who wanted to abolish the Philippines, a bunch of white people got up and said, "Death to the Philippines," were marching through the Filipino community in Toronto to say, "Destroy the Philippines, eradicate the Philippines, you're all a bunch of racists, the Philippines is a racist concoction of white supremacy." They would be laughed out of the gym. No one would take them seriously. People would write, "What are these racists doing? Who protests the existence of the Philippines?" Yet, when it comes to the Jews, and if you adhere to the most peaceful philosophy of all time, the peacefulness of peace, as it is known as peace, you are allowed to peacefully advocate for a peaceful genocide against Jews, and a peaceful execution of the gays, and a peaceful terrorist organization with explosive peace. Here's a quote from Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah. He says, "I hope all the Jews move to Israel so we don't have to hunt them down individually." That sounds like a very, very peaceful man to me. Doesn't that sound like peace to you? So this is allowed to happen. Now, here's a funny thing. A lot of these protesters were wearing yellow vests for some reason. They came in fluorescent yellow vests. Now, if you've been listening to the CBC, which I know you aren't, again, I listen to the CBC so you don't have to, you might be aware of Bernie Farber, the seventh appointed head of the Jewish community according to the CBC. He is also the chair of the Anti-Hate Network, which also has not released a statement on this. Usually, genocide's kind of their thing, but let's get back to that. So Bernie Farber, when he was on the CBC as the self-appointed head of the Jewish community, he said that wearing a yellow vest is a neo-Nazi movement. And I've had friends of Bernie Farber in Toronto City Councils to me say, yellow vests are the new white hood. So to get this straight, if you're in the yellow vest movement, just so you know, according to Bernie Farber, putting on a yellow vest and advocating for a pipeline to bring oil from Western Canada to Eastern Canada is anti-Semitism. Got it. Now, putting on a yellow vest and advocating for the genocide and eradication of Jewish people in the Jewish state is not anti-Semitism. Strange. Can we get a comment from Bernie Farber? Guys, if you could just go outside after the show is done, and if you see a man with his head stuck up his ass, please tell Bernie Farber to call me for comment, because I'd really like to know what he thinks of putting on yellow vests and advocating for genocide of Jewish people. I think that's a little anti-Semitic, the whole kill all the Jews. I think that's anti-Semitism. But I'm not the official head of the Jewish community, according to the CBC and Bernie Farber. That goes to Bernie Farber, who was kicked out of the Canadian Jewish Congress for probably being so vociferously against anti-Semitism. Another interesting thing we saw is these people were being bussed in from all over. There were constantly buses with police escorts coming, bringing them in, unloading people to advocate for more peace. Children were there. There were so many children there under the age of 10, put under banners of the Ayatollah Khomeini, a noted mass murderer, waving signs comparing Israel to Nazi Germany. Just disgusting, disgusting stuff. Standard Hamas tactics, using your children for propagandistic gains. So I got to give them that for consistency. The anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian, people who advocate for Palestinian rights are pretty good at sacrificing children for their political goals. So at least they're consistent about that. Comments from anyone from the Anti-Hate Network? The NCCM? Hello? Anyone out there? Anyone out there want to tackle this? Toronto Police Department, can we get a statement, please? Justin Trudeau, calling Justin Trudeau, or Doug Ford. Justin Trudeau, which just said we're committing a genocide. Can we get a statement on the advocating for genocide from Al-Quds Day, please? No, we can't. Shameful. All right, before I get even mad at our next story, let's do a little bit of a palate cleanser. This one is a Laughed Reacts only story. Guys, can we please bring up this new headline we saw? As you know, Hillary Clinton is the most beautiful, the most qualified, the most amazing woman to ever see. So Hillary Clinton to serve as keynote speaker at Cyber Defense Summit. Okay, if you don't know why this is hilarious, you remember Hillary's email scandals where it was totally not her fault, where she had her interns smash them with the hammer and bleach the hard drives. You know that one, where she was clearly innocent. Now, if you remember Hillary's defense in the email scandal, she said two things. Remember, she is the most qualified and beautiful person out there, and if you don't love Hillary Clinton, you hate all women. All of them. You hate every single woman. Your mother, your daughter, your sisters. If you don't love Hillary Clinton, you hate all women. Guys, how much do you love Hillary Clinton? Good, I got the thumbs up from Sean. Awab seems to be a misogynist, because he doesn't love Hillary Clinton, like I do. Now, Hillary Clinton is so beautiful and so qualified. Her defense for the email scandals was literally, iPhone? What's an iPhone? I don't know how to use an iPhone. I'm old. Then why do you share classified information with the Saudis and the Russians? What does the C mean? I didn't know the C on the email meant classified. Oh, no. Secretary of State, I don't know what the iPhone, you had 13 iPhones. I don't know what the iPhone are doing. I don't know what this whole email is. Email, oh. And people said, oh, it's not perjury and obstruction, it was just incompetence. That was her defense. The most competent woman to ever exist. Email? What's the email on an iPhone? My kids have to tell me what a text message is. Whoa! That was her literal defense. And now she will be speaking at a cyber defense summit in which she will perjure herself in front of the entire country. So I just find that hilarious. Guys, remember, if you don't love Hillary Clinton, you hate America and all women. All of them. Every single one. Now, heart reacts for Hillary. Okay. Probably the thing that wanted to make me smash my head through the TV the most is I watched the entire closing ceremonies to the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Inquiry. Now, some people said that it was just a propagandistic time waster that will be used for, far left rhetoric purposes. And nothing says spectacle like a closing ceremony. What is this, the fucking Olympics? We need a whole closing ceremony at the Museum of History or the Museum of Civilization, whatever it's called. It's a really boring museum in Ottawa. Don't go to that one. If you go to Ottawa, go to the War Museum. It's fantastic. That one sucks. It's boring. I've been there. It's my job for a while. Ugh. Now, if you've been following me for a while, you know when they first said they're going to spend $40 million on this inquiry, I said, wow, what a waste of money. I will do this entire thing for $1 million and save us all money. I think it ended up being somewhere between $50 million to $100 million in total. But if you followed me, if you look at what I said 3 years ago, 2 years ago, I said this. What is going to happen is this is going to be the findings. We're going to maybe focus in on the 3 to 5 cases they can identify of women being murdered by non-Indigenous people. Because what you're going to find in any murder of women is the same thing you found for all of history. Here's a statistic for you. Do you know who the #1 danger is to Filipino women? Filipino men. Do you want to know who the #1 danger is to Jewish women? Jewish men. Do you want to know the #1 danger to black women? Black men. Do you want to know the #1 danger to white women? White men. Do you want to know the #1 danger to Egyptian women? Egyptian men. Do you want to know the #1 danger to indigenous women? Indigenous men. It's not because they're this or they're that or they do this or they're doing that or blah. It's just one of the things of humanity. The most likely person to kill someone's wife is their husband, then the brother, then the father, then the neighbor. Now, studies said about 70 to 90% of these women were killed by indigenous men. Of course that makes sense. It's not because the indigenous are savages murdering their own women. It's because they're human beings. They are human beings like everyone else who suffer the exact same problems and have the exact same social structures for the most part. Okay? There's nothing to do with them being inferior or useless or whatever. They're just human beings, which is what no one will tell you in academia these days, is that indigenous people are human beings. 2, I said, here's what you're going to find. People are racist and the reserve system is broken. Now, of course, we're not going to talk about the broken reserve system. We're just going to talk about throwing more money at it. So let's back up. What you saw, if you watched this whole thing, was the bastardization of Native American history and a complete caricature of their history. Basically, it turned them into, if I could summarize what they said of Indigenous history is, we like to do these random dances, and we're all sitting around smoking the peace pipe as a bunch of transgender hippies in the forest. That's what this inquiry basically had to say. Because I thought this was an inquiry into the missing and murdered women and girls. But it's 2019, so every time it said girls and 2SAIAIPQ right? Every time someone got up there and say, we need to talk about our women and girls at 2SAAIPSO. If you watch the whole thing, you would be under the impersonation. If you were an alien coming in to see that, you would think the biggest problem in the Native American community, Native Canadian community, our first, whatever you want to call it, is transphobia. It is not in the top 100 problems facing the indigenous people. Not in the top 100. Maybe not even the top 1,000, transphobia. But everything you heard was basically transphobia this and transphobia that and transphobia this and transphobia that. Now the #1 thing everyone's focusing on is they've called it a genocide. So 3,000 women murdered over a span of 50 plus years, where 70 to 90% of that is within their own community. The others are usually sex workers who went missing because, again, this maybe is a case for legalization of sex work, is to stop the violence against sex workers. We can have that conversation another day. But this is a genocide. How is anyone going to take you seriously when you try and say that, what is it, under 1,000 women who were killed by non-Indigenous men tantamount to a genocide in Canada? And then Trudeau got on TV yesterday, on Tuesday, say, yep, genocide. We agree it's a genocide. Our justification? Well, we spoke to some family members and they said it was a genocide, so it's a genocide. Okay. Genocides usually correspond in a decrease in the targeted population. Prior to 1939, there were 18 million Jews in the world. 6 million died within a 6-year span in the Holocaust. Currently, there's about 14 million Jews worldwide. We have not recovered our population. It will take more than 100 years to get back above the original number. Genocide. Over 1 million Armenians were killed by the Young Turks and some Kurds in the Armenian genocide. Genocide. Pol Pot killed over 2 million, at max, 25% of Cambodia was wiped out in Pol Pot's purchase. Genocide. The Hutus killed the Tutsis in days, massacred hundreds of thousands. Genocide. When Iran, when the Persian Empire invaded India and took over, they ordered 3 days of killings in Delhi. They ordered the armies to massacre people for 3 days. Over the rule of Persia and India, 100 million people were massacred. Buddhism was wiped out of India, saved in Japan. genocide, one of the worst genocides in human history. These are monumental human tragedies, and those deserve genocides. But when you call this a genocide, people are going to turn you up because it's not. And this isn't to say that it isn't a tragedy. It absolutely is. But it's not this crazy, crazy racist genocide that we all want it to be. Now, one of the recommendations they gave is we need to decolonize ourselves. This was full with leftist mumbo-jumbo rhetoric of just double down and double down. And one of the ways we decolonize ourselves is by learning Native history, which is what we're going to do right now, because it's actually important. And looking at Canadian Indigenous history, there is a way forward. There is a way for us to work together with common interests and make life better for us working forward, because both our histories are being erased. Right? I hear people always saying, like, well, white genocide. Okay, one, there's no white genocide. Okay, get over yourselves. Just make yourself more fuckable than people who have sex with you. That's how we end the white genocide. But people are saying white history is being erased and replaced with brown people history, or native history, or all these different histories. Now, this is half true. The history of Canada, the history of white people is being replaced. But it's not being replaced with brown history or black history. It's being replaced with the transgender chronicles of Narnia. It's being replaced with this absolute leftist nonsense and mumbo-jumbo. Everyone's history is being erased. Yours, mine, the Indigenous people, black Canadians. No one's real history is being taught in academia anymore. That's true across the board. It's not being replaced by any nefarious cabal of global... It's just being replaced with leftist mumbo-jumbo that makes no sense and didn't occur. So here is Canadian History 101, the quick version, because... Okay. People will make the case to you, as was made to me in university, that the natives were tricked off their land with crazy treaties. They just didn't know all these crazy little words. Legitimately, I went to Queen's University, which is allegedly a school, supposedly in the top 100 in the world, and they told us that, hey, the Inuit had different compound words. That's why it's racist to say there's 200 different words for snow. It's just snow with different compound words. It's a conjunction language. But they don't have a word for legal contracts. Well, yeah, you don't expect the Inuit to have a word for legally binding land contract, but they could still understand what land was. And there was many different cultures. So I said, ignore the Museum of Civilization in Ottawa. You'll learn nothing there. What you will learn if you go to the Museum of the War Museum, go through the first exhibit. It's a great exhibit. Look at an Iroquois fort and a village and tell me those people don't understand the concept of land ownership. You can't do it. You cannot do it, okay? The Iroquois were people. Now, one thing you have to know, because this is going to be important, one of the reasons that Indigenous culture is so hard to revive right now, and one of the bigger problems in history, is they were never united. This wasn't like the Maori in New Zealand, which even had different subtribes, but ultimately were under one sort of culture that was kind of unitary, even though they fought amongst themselves. That's one thing, because New Zealand is a small island where everyone's closer together, more geography, whereas Canada, if you haven't checked, is ginormous, right? It's hard for the people on the plains to have the same culture as the people in the tundra, same people in the grasslands. Like, there's just different geography, there's different tribes, right? Different languages, different cultures. They were never really united. In fact, there's no borders, no walls, right? They tried to make the thing that, oh, war, like, there would be no war if women ruled the world. Well, tell that to the Falkland Islands. They tried to make this case that there would be no war. We just had this Indigenous vision of everyone living peacefully together in Canada. No, you didn't. Some tribes were very peaceful and diplomatic. Some were not. Right? Tell me the Apache were a peaceful people. Okay, now they're known as great warriors. The border between Ontario and Quebec was actually the armistice line, or where the line was between the Algonquin and the Iroquois. The Algonquin and the Iroquois were fighting each other for we don't know how long, we think thousands of years. And the Iroquois is basically Quebec, Algonquin is Ontario. Okay. What the left will try and tell you is in 1608, Samuel de Champlain got off the boat in Quebec City and yelled, "White power!" with a southern accent. "Let's go eat some Indigenous babies. Ripping throats out. Pew, 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 pew." Then he also turned into Yosemite Sam for a bit. It's not what happened, okay? The story of the Indigenous is a legitimate tragedy. It's a Shakespearean tragedy, okay? Because there's allegiances and betrayals. It's complicated, and it's actually emotionally tear-jerking if you listen to it. If you just want to portray it as we got off the boat and tried to kill them all, that has nothing to the story, and it's not what happened. In Quebec, The French started to settle. In Ontario, you said the English started to settle. So because the English got into conflict with the Algonquin allied with the French, and the English allied with the Iroquois. That was pretty standard for those two people. Now, we also hear the thing of the British Empire used divide and conquer tactics. This is another one of those stupid racist things the left wants to perpetrate that's basically a white power and clan rhetoric rejigged and thrown back at you. Divide and conquer tactics are one of the oldest known military strategies. Genghis Khan and his Mongols, who are not the most civilized, well, they knew a lot about war. They used it. Alexander the Great used it. All great military conquerors, including the indigenous, knew of dividing, right? It's simple, right? If you have two enemies, and if you can get them to fight each other, right, then they don't fight you. It's pretty simple. The British didn't invent this. The natives weren't overly fooled, right? They knew how to make alliances. They switched alliances. I've said this before. The Micmac, which are also in this region, were notorious for this, because they knew what right? They had to deal with the Iroquois and the Algonquin at each other's throats. The Micmac were famous for switching sides between the English and French consistently, and they'd always switch to the losing side, because they understood. They had a good political acumen. They understood. Right? It wasn't that hard for the Micmac and a lot of other indigenous tribes. They saw people coming out in red going, blah, 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 blah. Then they saw a bunch of people in blue going, blue, 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 baguette. And they said, you know what? The blah, blah, blahs don't like the blue, 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 blues. So if we can play them against each other, we get better deals, right? They got steel and trade deals. Like, they were getting things in trade and exchange. And this had negative effects because, more in the south, less so in the north, but first contact hit them with disease, right? Many of the people died first from disease, and it's a tragedy. It's terrible. That's not a genocide, right? There was no one, germ theory wasn't even in the public conscious till the 19th century. We're talking about 1600s now, okay? That was not what happened. Now, the population did recover. So, Canadian History 101, Saint Champlain sets up in Quebec City. Quebec City is the most important part in Canada because it's the most important in all of North America. It's a choke point of the St. Lawrence. The St. Lawrence River, it gets you straight from the Atlantic Ocean, gets you all the way down to the Mississippi. It is the mouth, and it's the ancient highway to North America. And in Quebec City, the river narrows, so you can set up cannons on both sides and completely blockade a shipping force. So that became the most important part. Now, for years, the indigenous knew that we get better deals when the French and English are here. Now, let's get to the 7 Years' War, which has started when famous British general George Washington starts fighting the French over some forts on the East Coast in 1754. The war ends in 1763, meaning the 7 Years' War lasts 9 years because Europe or something. Now, this is also called the French and Indian War by the Americans because they fought mostly French and what are now, it's a bad name because there are Indians in this war, but they're over in India. This is why this should be really called the First World War. It should be the 7 Years' War. But anyways, we digress. But Native Americans fought on both sides in most major conflicts all throughout North America. Now, the majority fought with the French in the 7 Years' War, but not all of them. Now, because the war happened, the Plains of Abraham happened, the French are kicked out of Quebec City, the English take control, and there is no more French. So the English actually fear a bad dealings with the natives. So they start to sort of pay a bit of reparations, and in order to do that, they increase taxes on the Americans. Now, there's one thing you know about America, they are not big fans of taxes. So they rebel because they don't want to pay the taxes for a British war in which they have to finance the indigenous people. So here's another parallel struggle that happens. The indigenous now realize that there is a new struggle forming in North America. The French are gone, but they can sort of keep this against the Americans and the British. There's a new power imbalance. However, they don't get off on a good foot with the Americans because Americans didn't want to pay taxes to give it to the indigenous. Okay? Which means they started to ally more with the British. And here's one of the things. Let's fast forward a couple years to the War of 1812 because it's really important for Canadian history. But one of the reasons why Canada exists and we're not the 51st province of America is because of the Native American forces. This is where Tecumseh comes in, and his brother whose name I can't pronounce. But Tecumseh is the first person to actually unite the indigenous people under one banner. He actually says, hey, we're all the same people, and he manages to unite them. And because they are united for the first time, they actually get bargaining rights. And one of the deals for the War of 1812 is the British were going to set up an independent, indigenous-run country, now Indiana, that Tecumseh would control. And that was the deal. However, the War of 1812 was silly, and it ends in a tie. And in 1813, at the battle, Tecumseh is killed by William Henry Harrison. Okay, and after Tecumseh dies, this coalition breaks apart, and they no longer have any bargaining power. And that's where the real tragedy of the indigenous starts. It's after the War of 1812 and after the death of Tecumseh, because they have no more bargaining power, because they fracture again, and they can't bargain as a collective. Now, after the War of 1812, or let's go, like here's one thing you have to know. Laura Secord, she's like the Canadian version of Paul Revere. We all might know the story of Laura Secord. She heard that the Americans were going to attack a Canadian town. She walks 32 kilometers into the night to warn the British forces. But who did she warn? Who did she come to? It was the Mohawk. It wasn't a bunch of white people. And she didn't go, ooh, savages. She's like, oh, my homies. She tells the Mohawk, who then inform the British, and they repel the Americans, right? And then she gets a chocolate store named after her, right? Hero of the War of 1812. Who did she go to? The Mohawk. So this is the tragedy of it. These are our brothers. These are the people who fought and died beside us to help keep Canada independent from America. Now here's where the tragedy starts, right? Their coalition breaks apart. Then Canada, out of fears of manifest destiny, we need to start settling westward. So the Crown starts to encourage new people to settle westward and offer free land to offset the threat of the Americans. Now you have new Canadians coming in who don't remember what the Indigenous people did for them in the War of 1812. They start to come in conflict because now the Canadians are doing what the Americans are doing and settling these lands. And that's when the conflict starts to go. Then we get to Confederation. Then they're screwed over. And finally, in the 1870s, right, Sitting Bull kicks General Custer's ass because Custer was an idiot. The Americans get all mad. Who does he come to? He comes to Canada. We offer him refuge. Then the Americans say, if you offer Sitting Bull refuge, we're not going to give you any food. Right? We're going to blockade you. So then they had to get into this point where we kind of betray Sitting Bull. We don't give him to the Americans, but we don't give him food, so they end up starving, and then they have to come back. And the Americans arrest him and execute him. Right? Then it starts the what we can say the cultural destruction of the Indigenous people. We try and destroy their lands. We take Indigenous kids out of their homes. We give them to the residential schools, which again, it gets complicated here. Because some of these schools were schools where you had teachers who actually said, hey, you know what? It's an industrialized world. The world is changing. We need to teach these kids English and the skills to go forth in the world because, let's be honest, if you want to go back to the way you're living in 1605, you know, what's the life expectancy there? And then a lot of these schools were run by the Catholic Church, which means they were tended to be a bit rapey concentration camps. Okay, that happened. Horrible sexual abuses done by the Catholic churches, beatings by nuns. Indigenous kids were taken out of their family, beaten for trying to speak their own language. We tried to eradicate their culture and integrate them. And yes, that is something to apologize for. And yes, it's not good, but when we just want to tell the story like it was racism right off the boat, that we went in, started grabbing babies and biting their heads off and hanging their bodies on the rafters, yelling, "What power?" It's not what happened. And we have this whole thing about truth and reconciliation. And here's my problem with truth and reconciliation, how it's been done in the Trudeau government. Two things it does not have are truth or attempts to reconcile. Right? One of the big things the biggest problem facing the natives right now is reserve systems. And it's not because they're this or they're that or the Indigenous way of life is, no. It's because they turn into socialist hellholes. They're designed to be failures. It's a complete system failure on every level. You cannot just throw money into a system where it's all a collectively owned land, right? Socially owned land. You throw money into a council. There's no oversight from another thing. So you essentially have big flows of money heading into a council, which means the people who want money, you're not encouraging good governance. You're encouraging corruption. Right? The whole system is broken. And instead of trying to fix it, we're just throwing more money at it, which is one of the problems in the first place. Under the current reserve system, I can invent a pill that gives every Native American person the IQ of 140 at least, which is genius level, triple their athletic and endurance abilities, and then increase funding to $1 billion a year. As long as they're under the reserve system, it's going to fail. Because that system is designed to fail, and it has nothing to do with Indigenous culture or Indigenous way of life or Indigenous peoples, this or that. It's a terrible design system, partially designed by apathy, partially with good intentions, all socialist nonsense. It won't work. It is designed to fail. And instead of actually dealing with this problem, instead of saying, hey, we have a legitimate problem with the way the reserve system is structured, right? People can't own individual land. There's no responsibility to it, right? We just throw money to the top. It encourages corruption on the councils, right? Instead of actually dealing with that, right? If you want a solution, I don't know the answer, but I would say we want to be serious, we have to break up the reserve system. divide the land into the families that live there, give them private ownership of their own land, individual ownership, so they actually have legitimate property. They have something that is theirs. They can sell it. They can develop it, right? You can't develop collective land. You need, like, in order to do something on the residencies, you need like 8,000 permits over the course of 20 years, right? There's so much barrier to doing anything because they have to be preserved. So people can't do anything with their land. They have no individual autonomy. Now we can keep things, right? We can say, hey, we screwed you over, and you fought for us, and you're the original part of Canada, so you can get free post-secondary education. I'm fine with that. No sales tax, whatever. Have fun with it. And we can keep some of those things, but as long as we have the reserve system and just throwing blind money at it, it's always going to fail because they're under two governments. We all know government sucks at everything, but they have one socialist government and one quasi-nonsense socialist government in Canada. That's not twice as bad. That's nearly 10 times as bad because it's exponentially terrible for them. And until we actually talk about fixing that, doesn't matter what we do. It's still going to turn out to be an abject failure. It has nothing to do with Indigenous culture, way of life, or how their people are. It's nothing to do with how Canadians view them. It's a system designed for failure, and until we address that, we're wasting time and money on it. Okay. Let's take a breath. Now, you remember Climate Barbie, sometimes referred to as Catherine McKenna. So last week, she was caught on video saying, oh, we should have played this video again, but it's too late. Caught on video basically saying if you say something loudly enough and you keep repeating it and you lie and you keep saying it, people will believe you. That's how Catherine McKenna's view in the House of Commons is. So let's pull up this tweet from Catherine McKenna. Now, remember, you're all going to die. Let's see. All right, families are fleeing from their homes by fires, including one that's grown by more than 3 times the size of Edmonton. My thoughts go out to everyone, our environment, and our health, and our future. And she's basically blaming Jason Kenney, because Jason Kenney repealed the carbon tax. Oh no, the carbon tax! It will save us all. We're all going to die unless we get a 4th tax on gas. We're all going to die. We're all going to die. We're going to die. You're going to die. And all your kids are going to die. Now, she's basically saying, and they made the case, and her and Trudeau came out and said, because Jason Kenney repealed the carbon tax, look at all the forest fires happening. Look at them all happening. Except this happened. Pull it up. What do we got here? Turns out, oops. Turns out there's been a bunch of arrests since then for people for arson. Turns out people have been lighting these fires. Oopsie doozies. Turns out Catherine McKenna is a lying fraud who's a propagandist for the Liberal government. Who would have thought? Me. I thought that. I've been saying that for years. Now, this doesn't even make sense, the whole climate change. Now, the whole climate change caused forest fires, you have to kind of say, okay, climate change is because things are getting really, really hot. And because things get so hot, it dries out the forest. And because it's drier, then it catches fire easier. And that's why climate change causes forest fires. Except, this is now the coldest June on record. So, even though it's really cold now, it still causes forest fires because climate change, or because the ice caps are melting, the moisture goes into the air, it causes a fire tornado in Alberta? Come on! Step your game up, Liberals. Right? I'm totally willing to have environmental conversations. What can we do for the environment? Maybe stop dumping all that raw sewage in the St. Lawrence River. But I'm not willing to have this conversation of, unless we use a carbon tax, everything's going to be on fire and we're all going to die. Unless we tax this and this and this, we're going to die. How about we have an arson tax? You think that will stop it? How about we put a tax on arson? If you want to start a forest fire, you have to pay a tax first. The arson tax. Let's do that. That should save everyone's lives. But no, we're all going to die. We're always all going to die. Never mind that BC's had a carbon tax for 11 years and they're still experiencing high rates of forest fires. We're all going to die. There's an article in Vice saying we're all going to die by 2050. No, you're not. Everything's fine. Shut up. Calm down. People. Mashugana. Crazy Liberals. All right. Let's go on to this. Andrew Scheer. Paging Andrew Scheer. Can we get a backbone, please? Now, I've gone on record and said, I'm going to vote for Scheer, and then I'm going to join Maxime Bernier's party. Why? Because, let's be honest, PPC people, I love you, but they stand a 0.00000000000 chance of winning. Maybe a -3. Somewhere between -3 and 0% chance of winning. Hey, it's just the way the election's structured. This isn't America, okay? This is a first-past-the-post parliamentary system divided into ridings. You can't just come out of nowhere and win that, okay? Our system is sort of designed to keep people like Bernier out. It's designed to have the center hold. Okay, it's just the way it's designed. But how is Andrew Scheer going to blow this election, you ask? By being Andrew Scheer. So I'm going to start and say Michael Cooper did nothing wrong. Who is he? He was an MP, and in an inquiry there was a Muslim witness into the rising Islamophobia and hatred, because Canada is racist! Everyone is racist! Except if you advocate for genocide of Jews and the execution of gays. That's totally cool. As we've learned, that's cool. Kill Jews, execute gays, Hezbollah. Great. What is not good is Islamophobia. And this witness got up and said, and basically said, okay, all these different things, the alt-right, climate thing, and he basically said, you know, different things, and conservative, right? He basically said, conservative media is a gateway to New Zealand massacre. He made that case, right? A witness got up and said, basically, listening to me, a conservative pundit, is a gateway to going and shooting up a mosque, right? It's not. Don't kill anyone. That's a terrible idea. Michael Cooper was an MP who got up and said, okay, if you're going to say that conservatism is responsible for New Zealand, I'm just going to read you some things from the New Zealand Shooters Manifesto, where he says conservatism is a bad ideology. He's anti-conservative. He admires China. He calls himself an eco-fascist. Right? He quoted a bunch of parts in the manifesto that attacked conservatism and spouted, you know, more left-wing nonsense, basically saying this guy isn't a conservative. And then they have to kick him off the committee because how dare he talk about the manifesto at a Muslim? Oh no! Oh no! That was the whole news from the CBC and all the major outlets and all the MPs. Oh no! A Muslim had to listen to the words. A Muslim was subjected to words. Oh no! That was essentially the case. A Muslim man had to listen to the manifesto being read. Listen, Buttercup, if you're testifying before a federal inquiry, you have to listen to words. I expect you to have a bit of balls. I expect you to listen to words and not have a mental breakdown, okay? And if you can't do that, if you can't listen to someone describe themselves as eco-fascist or say, hey, your link between all conservatives and rampant mass murderers is incorrect, if you can't listen to that and you can't listen to someone recite facts contrary to your argument, get lost. Don't testify in front of a federal inquiry. But no, because conservatives are massive pussies, he had to come out and apologize, and Andrew Scheer had to launch an investigation, and this is very inappropriate. Never, ever, ever under my conservative government will a Muslim's feelings ever be hurt. We will die in defense of your feelings. Oh, fuck off. Really? Can we just stand our ground and say, you know what, he talked about eco-fascism. He didn't talk about any of the anti-Islam or nonsense replacement things, right? He talked about the parts that disagreed with his narrative. Everyone, suck it up. But no, now his entire testimony had to be expunged from the record because, God forbid, a Muslim ever read words. Oh no, reading. Oh, they'll explode. Really? And we wonder why everyone tried to kill Salman Rushdie and the world did nothing. Then what's worse, at an inquiry about censorship on social media, Lindsay Shepherd, Mark Stein, I can't remember who else was testifying, and even the Conservatives voted to have this not go on TV. Well, we can't look at Lindsay Shepherd anymore? Are you fucking kidding me? Oh no! If someone were to talk and listen to Lindsay Shepherd, what? What would happen? What would happen if anyone saw Mark Stein on TV? Would people just start dying of diphtheria? But no, we can't have a spine. This again, conservatives are, everyone I talk to in the Conservative Party is convinced it's the year 2006, where the CBC controls the entire narrative and Canadians just want diet vanilla ice cream. Blows my fucking mind. Just want to bash my head against the wall. We can't listen to Lindsay Shepherd. She can't be on TV. Lindsay Shepherd can't be on TV. Guys, grow up. If she says something you disagree with, Post a counter-argument. You know how you destroy Lindsay Shepherd? When she says something wrong, say, it is wrong because you said X, where really Y is the truth. Destroyed! Instead it's, yeah! Transphobia! Yeah! And you wonder why people don't take you seriously. Losing my fucking mind on this nonsense. Losing my mind. Grow a backbone. Andrew Scheer, I will donate my spine to you. Yes, I realize I'll probably die. I am willing to have a full spinal transplant for Andrew Scheer. He's like 6'4", and I'm pretty small. So if someone else wants to give their half their spine, we got one spine, we need another half a spine to get Andrew Scheer a spine. Guys, I'm starting a new charity. It's the Get Andrew Scheer a Spine and Maybe a Pair of Testicles .org. Please donate now at 1-800. For God's sake, stand up for yourself. Thank you. All charitable charity donations will receive a receipt from me. Side note, Tech TV wants to let you know that that is not a real charity and something, something, something. Don't fall for Daniel's nonsense. Okay. Our final story tonight is the internet. The place where you're watching me right now. Vox, a subsidiary of NBC News, is mad at Steven Crowder because Steven Crowder proved that Carlos Mensa was wrong. So, okay. Here's the drama. Vox makes these series. They suck. They're usually inaccurate. But hey, I'm a conservative pundit, so maybe I have conservative bias. I openly admit to that. I come from a different perspective than Vox, which is a trash bucket. Okay. So Carlos Mensa has this series where he says things like, you know, global warming is going to kill us all, and the number one problem for the natives is transphobia, or whatever leftist nonsense. The Green New Deal is probably the greatest thing ever written, right? Now, Steven Crowder does these things where he debunks these videos. This is a common thing. Someone puts out a video on YouTube that gets millions of views, pushing a political agenda. Someone on the other side will say, here's a video debunking all the things in there. Now, people are mad because Steven Crowder, and even when I thought Crowder does a good job debunking them, but again, I don't think he should be mocking his homosexuality or his Mexicanness. It cheapens his argument. Right? Now, is calling him gay a hate crime? This guy's Twitter handle is literally gay wonk. So let's bring up his first tweet. This is Carlos Mensa talking about, here he is advocating for the assault of conservatives. Milkshake them all, humiliate them at every turn, make them dread public organizing. So here he is advocating for assault and battery against conservatives who come in public. This is, you know, in the UK, Nigel Farage got milkshaked. Here he is advocating for assault and battery and the humiliation of people he disagrees with. Tweet number 1. Tweet number 2. I appreciate everyone sending me support right now, but if you want to help, you should be focusing your attention on YouTube. YouTube, which is trying to figure out a way to avoid enforcing anti-harassment policies, the only response to public pressure. So here he is, advocating for the taking down of Steven Crowder for what? Harassing him? He openly advocates for assaulting and harassing and humiliating people. Now, he feels like he was humiliated because Steven Crowder does a bit of a gay accent and a gay Mexican accent when he taunts him. Don't do it, okay? Keep it to your point, Steven. And you make a lot of really good points. Those videos are nonsense. You have a lot better information in your videos. But it's not illegal. And 2, man up, Buttercup. Your videos get millions of views. Here's the deal. If you make political content, expect people to come at you. If you want to see the crazy things that people send me to this page in private, you know, the amount of anti-Semitic nonsense I get from people who adhere to the most peaceful philosophy in the world. The amount of hate I get from lefties, calling me stupid and names, it's a lot. It's all fine because I put myself out there and I understand what's going to happen. I make conservative political content. I understand it will make left-wing people angry. They will say mean things to me. I understand that I am a supporter of the state of Israel. I will openly say I'm Zionist. So I put these ideas out there. I don't act shocked and surprised when a bunch of crazy Israel conspiracy nuts say crazy anti-Semitic things at me. It's part of the thing. They're dicks. Don't do it. Don't harass people. But I'm not the victim. We don't need to ban them. I put myself out there for it. I understand. That's part of the gig. And these videos only get thousands of views. He gets millions. Man up, Buttercup. It's part of your job. Take it. But the reason this is happening, and I like Tim Pool's analysis, This is a complete scorched earth policy from the far left media, because you have to understand, all the left-wing media sources that go on the trending tab, that get trending, like Vox pretends it's independent media. It's not independent media. It's owned by MSNBC. It's corporate media. Motherboard, all the major left-wing, media outlets, they're all corporate mainstream media. It's all mainstream. It's rebranded mainstream media. And all these people work on salaries. So they can openly advocate for YouTube to demonetize everything, right? Right now, everyone on YouTube is getting demonetized. You're making gaming content, right? You're poning noobs on Fortnite, putting it on the internet, you're getting hit with this, right? And the reason they can do this is because they have salaries. They're mainstream. They're corporate. They don't need the ad revenue. The people who need ad revenue are people like me, right? Crowder has his own thing, but independent creators. You could donate to the Patreon if you want to help support the show. Really appreciate it, right? We're the ones who would need ad revenue. Carlos Menza doesn't. He makes a salary. He's rich. Vox is rich. They have enough money to fight legal battles. They have enough money to pay employees so they can do this complete scorched earth thing where they create another adpocalypse on YouTube. And this is the game of the left. If they're losing, they burn it down. And you see this now, right? All independent YouTube creators are not with Vox. They understand this will hit them, right? It's only the mainstream ones, maybe Hank Green, because he's rich now, runs VidCon. All the other subsidiaries of Vox and MSNBC are like, why? MSNBC is right by Vox. Why Vox is right by MSNBC? Bullshit. It's stupid. But this is probably one of the most significant things, because they're going to destroy the internet if we let them get their way. So what does the left even stand for anymore? Right? Remember when George Carlin said the 7 dirty words you can't say on TV? That used to be a liberal hero. Lenny Bruce. God, if Lenny Bruce could see what the comedians entertainment community stand for now, he'd die again. But this used to be one of the things on the left. And I agreed with it when I was a kid, right? Overly conservative religious types were fainting. We can't show violence on TV. You can't show boobs after 10 o'clock. Well, think of the children. Shut up. Let people say what they want. Remember, that used to be the left, liberalism. Now that the left has deserted liberalism, what do they even have? What do they have now? What's the thing? Guys, come here, chop off your dicks. Women, take your tits off. Come join the left. Where there's no more genders. The only thing the left has that the right doesn't is more genders. There's about 7 billion more genders on the left right now. So if you're looking for a new gender, vote liberal. If you're looking for anything else, if you like freedom, Western democracy, liberalism. If you like liberalism, vote conservative, because we're the only people trying to conserve liberalism. The only thing liberals are intent of liberating us from is liberalism. What does the left have? The Pride Parade, that's not even a thing. Well, I guess they tried to take it over. Right? It's all corporate now. We can't have police officers at Pride Parade. Yeah, God forbid the police department show solidarity with the gay Pride Parade. What a travesty. This is nonsense. Left is just a nonsense. Remember when Pride used to be fun? Remember when it was just a fun time that happened downtown and people were partied? Now you have a bunch of complaining. Pride, being gay is about resistance. Being gay is about resisting corporate culture. No, it's not. Being gay is about dudes wanting to have sex with other dudes. You know what lesbianism is about? Women wanting to have sex with other women. Fine, go for it. Have fun. It's about resistance to the corporate whatever. No! Being gay is about being gay. It means you want to have sex with dudes. Cool, I don't care. Have fun. Make a fun parade. There's usually ribs there. Ribs are delicious. There's dancing. All the straight white girls think it's the greatest thing in the world. They get drunk. Everyone else has a good time. It's a fun time. It used to be. Now it's a Black Lives Matter event. Now it's part of the resistance. Left doesn't even have fun anymore. No fun, no liberalism, just more genders. It's crazy. All right, it's 7:02. The Raptors are playing, which means I do not have time to go off on my own personal tangent. I didn't think I'd have time for a special event this week, but maybe tomorrow we'll do something on D-Day. I'll write something up, or I'll do a quick little video, because I think D-Day is really important. And the Canadian forces, the first wave, even though sustaining heavy casualties, actually managed to take Juno Beach. And Juno Beach, by all accounts, was the second hardest beach to take there. So tomorrow, really think of the people who gave their lives during D-Day, the most spectacular and important military operation in human history, the invasion of Normandy. So I'd like you all to think of the paratroopers, the Navy, the people who stormed those beaches, because those are real Canadian heroes, real American and British heroes. So I will see you all next week, next Wednesday, 6 p.m., same bat time, same bat place. Go Raptors.